Have you ever wondered what it truly feels like to live your entire life under the world's brightest spotlight, while carrying the darkest secrets in the shadows? Imagine walking on stage, hearing thousands of people scream your name, smiling for the cameras, and giving interviews where every word is replayed across the globe. Now imagine doing all that while holding on to something you never dared to share, something so heavy that every smile feels like a mask. That's not just a dramatic movie plot. That has been Johnny Depp's life for decades. And now, at the age of 62, those decades of silence have finally been shattered. Johnny has been a cultural giant for so long that it's almost hard to picture Hollywood without him. His career has stretched across generations. Parents, children, even grandchildren have grown up watching his movies. He's been admired, ridiculed, idolized, and criticized. And through it all, he kept his personal truth hidden away, as if behind a locked door that no one was allowed to open. But here's the thing about silence, it doesn't disappear. It builds. It grows heavier. And sooner or later, it demands to be broken. For Johnny, 62 was the age where that door finally creaked open. And what poured out was raw, imperfect, and deeply human. We live in a world where it's easy to believe we know celebrities. Social media, interviews, red carpets, they all create this illusion of intimacy. We think we see the real person, when in reality, we're only seeing what's been carefully curated. Johnny Depp is no different. For decades, we saw the rebel artist, the mysterious outsider, the man who didn't play by Hollywood's rules. That was the story the world loved, and that was the story he gave us. But what about the parts that didn't fit? The insecurities, the pain, the chaos, the loneliness? Those were kept out of sight. And isn't that the case for so many of us? The world sees the version we present, while the truth stays hidden in silence. The thing about Johnny is that his truth has always been there, just below the surface. Look closely at his characters, and you can feel it. They weren't just roles. They were fragments of him, pieces of pain, longing, humor, and sadness mixed together. And maybe that's why audiences connected so strongly with his performances. They weren't polished perfection. They were messy, emotional, and real. That kind of honesty doesn't come from pretending. It comes from lived experience. But behind the curtain, away from the cameras, Johnny fought his private battles. Battles that the world couldn't see, and battles that he didn't always have the words to share. Silence became his shield. He wore it like armor, protecting himself from judgment, from gossip, from exploitation. But silence isn't healing. Silence is heavy. And the longer you carry it, the more it weighs you down. Imagine carrying a stone in your pocket every day of your life. At first, it's nothing. Over time, it becomes heavier, not because the stone itself changes, but because the weight of carrying it never ends. That's what silence does. So why now? Why break that silence at 62? The answer is simple but profound. Age changes you. With time comes reflection. You stop living for applause. You stop worrying about judgment. And you realize that peace doesn't come from pretending, it comes from telling the truth. When Johnny finally opened up, it wasn't polished. It wasn't glamorous. It was unfiltered, raw honesty. And that honesty was more powerful than any role he's ever played. The lesson here isn't about Hollywood drama. It's about humanity. It's about the fact that every single one of us carries truths we don't share. Some of us hide pain. Some of us hide fear. Some of us hide who we really are because we're terrified the world won't accept it. But here's the reality, silence doesn't protect you. It imprisons you. And Johnny's story is proof of that. For decades, he turned to art as his escape. Acting, music, painting, these were his ways of saying the things he couldn't put into words. And maybe you do the same thing. Maybe you write in a journal. Maybe you play music when no one's listening. Maybe you draw, or run, or just sit quietly in the dark. Expression doesn't always need to be public. Sometimes it's simply the act of releasing what's inside. But here's the thing, expression is survival. It's how the human soul keeps itself from breaking. Experts often say that bottling up pain makes it worse. It magnifies it. It twists it. But letting it out, whether through art, through words, through simple conversation, lightens the load. Johnny's life shows that in the clearest way. His performances were never just entertainment. They were pieces of therapy, moments where he could breathe a little easier by giving part of his pain to a character instead of keeping it locked away. And yet, even that wasn't enough. Silence still lingered. The truth was still buried. Until now. And when it finally came out, it showed something we sometimes forget: resilience isn't about being flawless. It isn't about never breaking. Real resilience is breaking and then rebuilding. It's falling apart and still choosing to rise. And Johnny has done that again and again. His life hasn't been smooth. His career hasn't been without controversy. But each time, he has found a way to keep going. And that's strength, not the kind of strength that looks perfect, but the kind that looks human. You don't need Hollywood resources to take something from this. You don't need millions of dollars or the best therapists. Healing can begin with the simplest acts. A walk outside. A conversation with a friend. Writing a single sentence in a notebook. Or even just admitting to yourself, "I'm not okay." Sometimes, that's the bravest thing you can do. And that's the power of Johnny's revelation. It shows us that healing starts with honesty. Think about how much harder that is for someone in his position. Fame is not freedom, it's a cage. Imagine being watched every second. Imagine knowing that anything you say could be twisted into a headline. Imagine feeling like millions of strangers are waiting to judge your next move. That's the reality of celebrity. And that's why his silence lasted decades. Not because he wanted it, but because the world around him made truth too dangerous. But at 62, something shifted. He stopped caring about the noise. He stopped living for the crowd. He stopped fearing judgment. And in that moment, truth became possible. He didn't need perfection. He didn't need approval. He just needed peace. And peace only comes when silence is broken. So here's the real question. What's the silence you've been carrying? What's the truth you've locked away because you thought it was safer that way? And how would it feel to finally let it out? Because Johnny's story isn't just about him. It's about you. It's about me. It's about anyone who's ever hidden their pain, their fear, or their truth because they were scared of what the world would say. The irony is that Johnny has spent a lifetime telling stories. He's entertained the world, shaped culture, inspired fans across generations. But the most powerful story he's ever told isn't fiction. It isn't a character. It's this, the story of his own truth. A story that took decades to come out. A story that shows us that even the brightest stars carry shadows. And once that silence breaks, there's no going back. Once the truth is spoken, it can't be buried again. And that's a good thing. Because truth, no matter how painful, is freedom. And freedom is worth everything. At 62, Johnny finally found that freedom. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all. That it's never too late. Never too late to be honest. Never too late to heal. Never too late to shatter the silence. So let me leave you with this. The most powerful stories aren't always the ones told on movie screens. They aren't the ones dressed up in costumes and special effects. The most powerful stories are the ones hidden in silence, waiting to be spoken. Johnny shattered decades of silence, and in doing so, he reminded us all that the truth, no matter how dark, can be the beginning of something brighter. And now, I want to ask you. What's one truth you've carried for too long? What's one secret you finally let go of, and how did it change your life? Share your story in the comments below. Because your truth matters too. And if this touched you, if it made you think, if it opened something inside you, don't stop here. Stick around. There's another story about Johnny Depp's untold battles that dives even deeper, and I think you'll want to hear it. And before you go, do me a small favor, tap the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with a friend who loves real stories behind the spotlight. Because sometimes, the stories that matter most aren't the ones we watch. They're the ones we live.